Hey everyone, this is Alex from games.on.net, and first of all, before anything, I'd like to apologise. This video is in 720p only. I was only working with the PS4 version of the build. It was the only way that we could get code before release, or at least code in time for the embargo. And even though I have got a Blackmagic intensity little box set up in my living room, although the PC that I have set up next to the PS4 there, it's not quite configured yet, so I just had to go with the video recording off the PS4 directly. So it's only 720p, you know, but you will still be able to see a lot of it. It is, you know, nice and smooth, and you will be able to have action, you know, in time for the embargo, which is great. So you get an idea of what Mortal Kombat is like before it comes out. And the long and the short of it is, I quite like it, but there are some sort of bits and pieces, that caveats, if you will, that you need to know. Before we get into any of that though, like, I should explain where I come from, my biases, and that I'm a huge fan of the series. I own 3 copies of Mortal Kombat 9. And it was actually the first game I ever played on a console. One of the first games also I ever played on an Amiga. Although I didn't really play it that much on a console because I was a younger brother, and we had a family friend who they had Mortal Kombat, and I used to sit and watch my brother smash with Sub-Zero back then. This was just the very first Mortal Kombat. I didn't actually get to play 2 until later on, when sort of the trilogy came out as a full release, and then I could play all of those. But it was interesting because when Mortal Kombat 9 came back, Sub-Zero was so, and even Cyber Sub-Zero as well, was such an ordinary character. It was slow, the combos had long wind-up times, huge recovery times, and just following the action out of the Fatal 8 tournament, which was kind of like a promotional thing that NetherRealm did with ESL, as the European esports organisers. They run the event at Games.com, and sometimes they work with the guys at DreamHack, you know. Anyway, a lot of the chatter before the tournament actually started was the player who ended up winning the tournament. He was using Sub-Zero a lot in the practices beforehand, and now everyone was like, wow, Sub-Zero is really good again, it's coming back. And it is, like, Sub-Zero is amazingly good, especially with a couple of the variations. I think the Grandmaster one is going to work out. But in terms of Mortal Kombat 10, perhaps getting back to more of the specifics. So what I loved a lot about 9 was kind of the simplicity of how you could get back into it, which is one of the things I think Mortal Kombat, what makes it work for a lot of people, and that you can pick up Mortal Kombat a lot more easily than you can, say, like a Guilty Gear, or Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or a King of Fighters, or something like that. But Injustice, which came out after Mortal Kombat 9, was kind of a little more detailed than that, and that's kind of the direction that NetherRealm has gone with Mortal Kombat 10. So there's a couple of elements. I mean, apart from things like, so they've added lots of all the frame data for all the characters and all the moves, little tweaks like that. But, you know, wake up attacks have to be particularly timed. You have tech rolls, so like if your character gets knocked down, you can press one of the face buttons and you can roll away, but you've got to time it correctly. And when you first jump in to Mortal Kombat 10, especially if you're not a hardcore competitive player, if you're just like a casual enjoyment of fighting games, as it were, that's going to be something that's going to be a bit disconcerting. And especially for me, because I hated Injustice. Like, literally, it's been one of the... I picked it up on PS3 a couple of years ago, and I played it for 2 days, and then I returned it for Ni no Kuni instead. That's how much I hated it. I refused to keep it in my house. And, you know, I can't think of any other game, really, that I've done that with. So, the more background you have in Injustice, the more attuned you will be to coming over to Mortal Kombat. And another thing that's worth sort of mentioning is kind of, and I suppose this had to happen because Mortal Kombat 9 was essentially a reboot of the series, so it could retread a lot of the original story, and it could retain a lot of that almost, not campy, but certainly tongue-in-cheek sort of charm that the original movie had and sort of original Mortal Kombat had. How everything's a little bit silly, it's not that serious. Mortal Kombat 10 isn't about that. You've got a little bit of funny moments, you know, Johnny Cage, you know, towards in about the second half of the story mode, he sort of whips out his one-liners and things like that. But for a lot of the time, it's very serious, all the, you know, constantly. There's actually one or two, I'd say about 1.5 chapters in the middle of the game where they focus. You go to this secondary team that's set up effectively by the sons and grandfathers of, you know, so it's led by Cassie Cage, who is the daughter of Sonya Blade and Johnny Cage, and then you've got Jax's daughter, Jackie Briggs, and then you've got Takashi, I think, or Takeda, sorry, and he's Kenshi's son, and then you have Kung Jin, who happens to be, you know, the grandson of, you know, the famous Shaolins like Kung Lao and everything like that. So, you know, you have these cutscenes where these characters are sitting around whining about how, you know, much expectation they have on them, and, you know, how kind of annoying their family lives have been, and it's difficult to sit there and watch that and thinking, I'm still playing a Mortal Kombat game, right? You know, Mortal Kombat should be kind of silly and kind of fun while having just enough plausibility, because, I mean, you can't take this seriously, and that's my biggest problem with the story mode is, apart from the fact that it's also shorter, how precisely how long it will be will be dependent on your difficulty and your skill level. I played it on the very hard initially, and that was much more difficult than very hard in Mortal Kombat 9 was, not just because of the timing of wake-ups and everything, but also because the AI's gotten a substantial boost. So then I dropped it down to hard, and I played through on that for about up to the 6th chapter or so, and then I switched it on to medium so I could get through the rest of the story a bit quicker. I'll go back and eventually, and I'll do what I did with Mortal Kombat 9, and I'll replay the story on the different difficulty settings, because I enjoy it that much. But if you are playing it on a difficulty level where it only takes you about 1 or 2 fights to sort of work out your opponents, and especially if you're playing a lot of these characters for the first time, you will probably only need, I'd say, in the realm of 4 to 5 hours at most, really. There is a actual thing in the, you go to the chapters, because there's this weird thing where if you quit a fight in the story mode and then you go back to continue it, sometimes it continues it after the fight that you were in, even if you didn't win the fight. So you have to go back to the chapter menu and select it so you can replay the fight that you're in, which I mean, you could skip it, but I want to win honestly. And actually, interestingly enough, there are actually little consumables that you can sort of buy with the in-game coins with a K, obviously, that you earn, through playing, just as you win and lose different fights, and those can be used to skip fights. And you can also, there's one also to do quick fatalities as well, where you just essentially have to hold a direction and then hold down R2, and then it will automatically do the fatality for you, so you don't have to do the rest of the D-pad presses yourself, which is, I mean, fatalities are not that hard to do anyway, but I guess it's kind of nice that NetherRealm did that, because it's that sort of inoffensive occlusion. It's not a microtransaction. People who do fatalities the old way, as they always have, are never going to be bothered by it, so it just opens that up a little bit more. In terms of opening up the game as well, one of the, perhaps the most open thing that you might have noticed just from watching the footage over the last few minutes is just the interface is incredible. The menus and the way the UI has been done in this game is absolutely spectacular, but it's especially prevalent when you're just watching the battle scene, how it's incredibly minimalist. It takes up so little of the scenery, it's unobtrusive, which allows you to really enjoy the backgrounds, and it's a bit, you're not able to enjoy it as much watching this because it's in 720p and it's also in 30 frames a second. The game does play at 1080p and 60 FPS, at least on the PS4. I imagine it should do the same on the Xbox One. I don't know if it may be 900p. It should be 1080, but it will certainly be 60 FPS either way. And it is gorgeous and beautiful to look at. The animations are fantastic. If you're buying or looking to buy a console, oddly, you wouldn't look towards Mortal Kombat as something to show it off. but they have done an exceptionally good job. It just looks a treat. There are bits and pieces where you can look, you can see like there's a bit of lacking of detail in the faces themselves, in terms of they're a bit too smooth, and the graphics are kind of tend towards more of the what I call the shiny side of things. You know, there's a lot of, you know, particles and things, but in terms of like, if you're looking for, say, like a Witcher 3 level sort of detail of facial hair, that kind of nuance, Mortal Kombat doesn't do that nicely. It's more of a, there's a smoothness, the animations, that's their stock in trade, and they do that amazingly well. And if you just sit there and watch it, it's an absolute treat, and it's probably one of, I'd say, prettiest thing I've played on a console so far. But I mean, that's because, you know, I'm coming from PC. I'm a sucker for 60. I love the smooth frame rate and all of that. And if you're worried, don't be. It's a treat, and it should be even better on PC as well. So Mortal Kombat, there were some initial problems with the Mortal Kombat 9 PC port. I mean, there was some weird thing where if you were in 16:9 resolution, you could only find games against other people who are in 16:9 resolutions. So if you were on a 16:10 monitor, you couldn't get any games. You know, it was really strange stuff like that. But I mean, otherwise, the quality of the port was fine, and I would expect the PC port to be very good again. And I've been looking through as well, sort of the test you might find, which is sort of like the central one for Mortal Kombat, and a lot of the users there are preferring to go towards PC this time, and because the PC is also a simultaneous release, you should have a much better chance of the PC crowd staying, or having a good PC fighting crowd, because it's not something that usually happens. It's usually a console only thing, although there has been, you know, King of Fighters, and there's one other one whose name escapes me. It was in, I think, Guilty Gear might be actually. They're both in like a humble bundle, and they've had, you know, a consistent PC community ever since. So there is that. But as for the, going to more of the technical sort of details, so after you get over the wake-up systems and the rolls, most of Mortal Kombat 10 is, you'll be largely familiar with. Combos are just through a string of face button presses most of the time, and when I'm saying combos, this is not linking into a special move, it's just a straight, you know, punch, kick or whatever. And that's kind of why I like that, because it's very simple to input and it's very easy to get into. And then when you want to take it to the next level, you look at it, okay, alright, these are the combos I can chain something onto, these are the ones I can't, I can add into advanced ones here, and then you can go down that rabbit hole. And Mortal Kombat 10 does a lot better job of taking you down that far. There's a tutorial that sort of opens up to, you know, extending combos and doing a little bit of advanced things, which Mortal Kombat 9 sort of was a bit more bare bones on that. And obviously having the extra frame data and everything is a good help off the bat, especially for the competitive community. They'll appreciate having that information right up there. The story mode as well is not, and I did harp on it earlier, but it is not that bad. It's just I do miss the humour of Mortal Kombat being Mortal Kombat. It is still quite well done, and the fact that the game looks really good does carry it through as well. There are lots of different environments that the game takes you through, both in the stages and what they use in the cutscenes. And even some of the voice acting isn't too bad, although there is some that is actually terrible. Shinnok, towards the end, you don't get a lot of acting from him, but what his is quite, you know, quite corny, quite cheesy, and it feels very comfortable. It feels like what Mortal Kombat should be. As for the netcode, I can't really say anything at this stage, because you may or may not have known, but NetherRealm decided not to go with crossplay across regions. You know, crossplay for PSV Vita is a different thing, but so Australians are essentially stuck in ANZC. You know, you can't go and play people in the US deliberately or play people in Europe deliberately. And so there's been, I've kept looking for manual matches. I tried looking for matchmaking on the weekend. I tried actually only on, so by the time you get this, it'll be Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon. And I was looking on Sunday, and that was the day that the chat servers went up, so you could go into private rooms and things. And I had a look in there, and there wasn't anything that I could have gone into. You know, I tried searching, the pings were all full, and most of the lobbies I tried to create just sort of bombed out because, you know, I was probably playing somebody with a terrible thing. And a lot of the other things as well were initially enabled to things like to have these custom ladders, which are, in terms of a ladder, think like a traditional sort of ladder where, you know, you climb up and you face challenges. But there are randomized ones that you can do every day, and they're hourly, and those were shut down on Sunday as well. I presume they'll be re-enabled before release on Wednesday our time. But I mean, they were interesting, they were fun. You know, there's a custom ladder there just for, you know, breaking, you know, bits of wood, bits of aluminium. You work all your way up to the titanium Mortal Kombat symbol. It's kind of cool, and you get shot and stung by bees and have arrows fired into your gut if you fail. It's kind of funny, it's nice, it's nostalgic, it's cool that it's there. And there are all sorts of a lot of the things from Mortal Kombat now, like you test your might one, so you fight, go into different battles, and as you go into each different battle, it has like a different modifier. You know, you might have, you know, reduced damage or reduced life or whatever it happens to be. So that's all there. Now, a bigger change as well is that there's now this faction mode, although I'm not really entirely sure how much effect this faction mode will play out. So what it is, when you start the game, when you effectively first connect to online, you're asked to select one of 5 factions, and you've got things like Special Forces, which is like Sonya Blade, Cage. I mean, your player is not actually restricted to any of these factions, but in terms of where these factions come from, it gives you an idea of it. So you have like Special Forces, you've got like the White Lotus, like Raiden and the Shaolin and things like that, Black Dragon and the Shadows, and etc, etc. And as you go on and you play through, you win faction points, and you can also, you have like a little custom card that has 3 different elements, which essentially acts as when you go into a chat lobby, they see this kind of badge, kind of similar to Street Fighter, the way you have that, but you can customize this, and each of the different elements allows you to, one might give you like 15 faction XP per win, or you can change that to 5 coins every time you have a match win, so that would include single player, you know, and you can tweak it around and do all that sort of stuff. And the basic idea is that as every season sort of ends, although most seasons are not particularly long, it seems like one is only going to be, you know, up until the end of launch, and then another one might be a week long or something like that. A faction has declared the winner, and I can't really tell what that's going to do at this stage, and NetherRealm haven't said anything about that in terms of what it's going to provide. So, but I mean, it's there, it's nice, it's better than not having anything. It's a neat little trick. And actually, I'm just reminding myself now, as I'm talking over this, I'm watching back some of the footage. There are, and I felt really annoyed about this at the time, but a lot less by the time I'd finished the story mode. There are quick time events in the campaign, and initially I was like, really? A lot of people, especially if you're casual, you're already going to be mashing buttons. Do you really want this on top? But how it actually works is kind of different. Now, the thing that annoys me most about the quick time events isn't even the fact, now that I've finished the campaign and played a bit more, it's not that they're even in there, it's the fact that if you have to go back to that fight just before or just after the cutscenes, and you didn't finish it for whatever reason, maybe you were out of time and you just wanted to watch it before you're heading out of the house or something like that, you can't skip the cutscenes. You have to go back and do the cutscenes again. Or you have that annoying thing where the game's actually skipped that fight and then you have to go back, and then you also have to do the quick time events again. The button window, or sorry, the timing window for the quick time events is enormously generous though. But oddly, it doesn't actually seem to do anything, because a lot of the quick time events, you can fail and it just sort of carries on. And, you know, it could be a thing where you just get punched in the groin or you get stabbed, and you'd think that, oh, okay, well, if you're going to carry on and allow me to lose this or fail this particular part of the quick time event, does it have an impact on the fight? No. I have the exact same health bar. So what's the point of them in the first place? I can't really tell, it's strange, but I mean, they are in there and you can kind of see how it fits with the theme, but again, you know, just the mere presence of quick time events in a cutscene is going to annoy a lot of people. And initially I really hated it. I hate it less now, but in principle it's not something that they should have gone with. Because especially if you're playing something where this particular story mode that NetherRealm likes to do, and they've kind of perfected, I mean, less so on the writing side, but in terms of the way that they structure it across the different characters, and they've done it, you know, in this, they did it in Justice, they did it in MK9. The cutscenes are supposed to be a respite from button mashing or lots of presses, or especially if you're playing on a really hard or a difficulty above station, then you really want that reward of a break. And the quick time events just ruin that, especially when they come out of nowhere. Although I say they come out of nowhere, they don't, because the quick time events, when they happen, the screen goes back to full screen instead of the cinematic bars, which is something that always annoys me. But you know, that's how it is. I mean, you take it or leave it. The main thing for people is going to be, how does this game work in multiplayer? And again, the netcode is always going to be a question, and I'm going to come back and have a look at that after the launch, and we'll do a little something on that. But are the characters, do they kind of feel right? And that's the sort of the main thing now, is they're coming down to the variations. Each character has 3 different variations, and those variations usually give advantage to 1 or 2 things. So in the case of, say, like Sonya or Cassie, they might be able to, so Sonya particularly, she has like a demolitions one, which is just a variation that allows her to place like mines and throw grenades and things like that, whereas sort of the standard, sort of the default one, gives her a military stance, which is what Sonya had in Mortal Kombat 9. And you go through, you know, Raiden's one, which I think has been in some gameplay videos, or if you were at EB Expo you would have played there. But like, he has his Displacer one, comes with like the sort of the teleport. There's another one where he can place like anti-air electric traps, and there's all sorts of things like that. You know, there are some like Kung Jin, I think it is, or Kenshi, Scorpion as well. You know, they can get, you know, power up their swords or have something else, and that's kind of what NetherRealm are trying to pitch. Like, if you have a problem with a particular matchup or a character, the variations should allow you to sort that out. I think that's kind of the general idea, is that with the balancing issues, that they're hoping that the variations at least delay any involvement on their part, in terms of when things develop to a stage where it's like, okay, this needs to be patched. Because that seemed to, or at least, and I'm not talking as someone who was a competitive Mortal Kombat player, but someone who was always interested and followed it. And there was always, you always saw that was Cyrax and Cabal were king of the hill for forever, really, just because the amount of options they had, in terms of not only do they have lots of options, but they had lots of good options against everybody. And, you know, there was probably, you know, a patch that could have sorely needed a patch, but, you know, it's kind of, you see, I was going to say Konami for a second, but Capcom, they tend to do a similar thing rather than a patch. It's just sort of, you know, we'll just make it Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3, and that'll be sort of the balancing in there. So, but I mean, we won't know more about that until maybe, I'd say, probably a month out after release. It is worth noting at the final 8 that Aaron Black, who is one of the new characters, the Gunslinger, that was the one that was used to win the finals, and that was a 5-0 thrashing. It was absolutely brutal. And actually, one of the most brutal things about Aaron Black watching those finals, and just, you notice it playing, especially if you play on the hardest difficulties, the AI chains everything together pretty much perfectly. Like, you can block and then your window's in there, but it's a difference between, like, if you, as you go down the difficulties, apart from the fact that you have much less time to react to things, also the AI on, say, like medium or hard or whatever, they might only go for a basic combo, or they might slightly miss the execution or something. But on very hard, it's just like, no, you've chained. And if that your opponent happens to have, you know, 1 or 2 combos that can do up to 30 or 35 or 40% life, bad luck. you're pretty buggered. Another thing too as well with, again, coming from Injustice, they don't have the stage transitions, but they do have the stage interactions. So usually on most of them it'll be either one thing you can throw on both ends, or one thing you can escape from on both ends. When I say escape from it, so it might be a tree, and like your character might be able to run up the tree, which can be useful for getting out of a corner, although in reality, there's a lot, when I say a lot of time, we're probably talking about like maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds. And I think in any sort of half decent player, even bad players, will be able to see that happening and to be able to respond. And so I'm not sure how useful that will be, and especially if you're playing, you know, if you're going to play multiplayer regularly, you might be in a situation where interactions are turned, the stage interactions are turned off. So it's kind of, you know, that sort of thing would be irrelevant. But from my experience, from watching and mostly just playing as much as I could, at least against the AI anyway, there seems to be a lot less of a focus on projectiles among all of the characters, and more sort of running up and just getting in your face, doing, you know, lots of hard hits, which is nice. I like that. I mean, you do still have characters with good projectiles. Johnny Cage is still pretty good. Melina's is still pretty good. She has a really nifty low side, which is going to be a pain. I think a lot of people on the forums have already sort of picked that one out as something that's going to be a really good tool. And then you have like a lot of other characters. So, you know, Raiden's electric ball is pretty slow and not really worth the price of admission. Kotal Khan has like kind of a scepter, he sort of charges up and throws. That's not worth the price of admission either, just because the wind up on these things is too long. So for them it'll be more sort of like, you know, running in, going for, you know, the attacks. Aaron Black, actually, going back to him, his projectiles are kind of useful. They're not too bad. And also, but the big one is, he has one, I'm trying to think if it's Sonya or Cassie Cage. I think it might be Cassie Cage, actually. No, not Cassie Cage, sorry, Jackie Briggs, where they have essentially a low takedown. So it's a low attack, and they essentially just tackle the opponent to the ground, and, you know, Aaron Black will shoot them or whatever. But I mean, that looks to be really useful and really powerful at this stage, and so characters that can do that, I think, are probably going to excel initially. But, you know, again, take my uneducated opinion for what it is. It's interesting. Like I said, there's not too much more that can be said about Mortal Kombat 10 at this stage without getting into the netcode a bit deeper. This is, I think, on the whole, this is a better package than Mortal Kombat 9, provided, even if, you know, there is no improvement in the quality of netcode. I think as an overall offering, the game looks better. The range of fighters is more interesting. The new fighters, you know, you've Kotal Khans, you've got Pharaoh, I forget the second one, but he's like the big boulder dude, and he's got the little kid on top as well. Dvorak, which is kind of like the assistant to Kotal Khan. She reminds me a bit of, I want to say Symmetra from Overwatch, just in the design. That's sort of Egyptian robotic sort of, but she's, you know, less of a robot. She's basically like a brood mother for bees. It's kind of weird and very creepy. There's actually a really sort of almost gross scene where, and I'll try not to spoil it, but Dvorak kills someone, and actually she kills 2 people, and they're both, one of them is pretty awesome, and one of them is just kind of like, ooh, that's not right. So, but that's in there as well. They all seem fun. The sons of daughters, Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs, are both fun to play with, and I'll go back and I'll spend more time with those. Kung Jin, you've got, you know, Takashi as well. They're good. They look like they have good range and good utility. But in a month's time, because we've got a whole bunch of tournaments coming on, you know, Battle Arena Melbourne is only a month or so away. I think there's something up in Queensland in a week or 2. You know, there's going to be a whole string of tournaments very soon, and we're going to find out a lot more about where the game actually properly sits in terms of netcode and also in terms of balance. But just, if you're getting it, and if you're worried about whether it would be any good, relax. It is. Just don't expect the story mode to be better, because it's a bit too serious. It's a bit too haphazard. it does still work, but it's not as much fun in terms of, you know, the cheese humor or anything like that. It's just, and that's kind of inevitable. It was kind of the direction that Mortal Kombat had to go because they rebooted it, and that's sort of the direction they take. You've got to, you flesh it out somehow. It is worth actually noting that it doesn't, you might know that it did start 20, it has been said that it's set 20 years after Mortal Kombat 9. It actually starts 2 years after the events of Mortal Kombat 9, and then after the first chapter it jumps in time 20 years in the sort of the Johnny Cage chapter. And most of the structure too is the same as well, by the way. Like you play Raiden towards the end, you've got Johnny Cage up in the front, you know, the ones you know and love, and then you get the new kids in the middle and towards the end. But I had a lot of fun. I'm going to keep having a lot of fun with Mortal Kombat 10. Like this was something, like I wanted to get into competitively Mortal Kombat 9, but it was too late, you know, because the game was banned, the community wasn't that huge. After a while, tournaments vanished altogether and were replaced by Injustice, which I hated. Mortal Kombat 10 doesn't have those issues because we have R18. We can buy this game now, and I quite like it. I'm going to try and play it competitively, so hopefully I'll see you around. But if not, if you just enjoy it casually, you can do that too. It's good, it looks good, plays great, it runs quite well. Does it play great on the multiplayer side? We'll find out in a week or so. But otherwise, that's just my take on Mortal Kombat 10. I hope you enjoyed it. It's nice to be able to have it out the day before it comes out. So, just for future, I'll try and get my little Black Magic box going and get that all set up so I can at least get 1080p. I don't think I'm going to be able to get 60 FPS 1080p with that set up because, like, you know, I'm recording from the console. I'm not recording from like OBS or something like that, which is a lot more, you know, I can't use shadow play or anything. So 30 FPS is going to be the limit there, sadly. But nevertheless, I'll work on that and hopefully we can get more great stuff for you in the future. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you all next time.